Diary of a Wimpy Kid, a book series that is immediately recognizable to any kid who grew up in the 2010s. And to an 8 to 11 year old me, these books were like the shit, as I was really awful at reading, with it being a mix of dyslexia and extreme apathy, with these books overcoming both. They just had an appeal, mainly because I thought the pictures were funny and they occupied 75% of the pages. So in terms of actual reading material, they would only be around 50 pages when you removed all the pictures. Hell, I even like these books so much I got a do-it-yourself book in Christmas of 2014, and oh god. Yeah, it's probably a good thing I didn't go far to this, although I find it hilarious that I poorly erased my initial run in 2014 and tried again in October 2015, with me still giving up after 2 days. Also, these 3 pages and everything else I drew in elementary school that I could dig up made me really glad I never tried to draw anything that wasn't a stick figure until like literally last month. I need to get back on topic, so yeah. Diary of a Wimpy Kid sure was something. So much so that there are several movies released over the past 14 years. Now, I'm only going to be talking about the trilogy from the early 2010s, as the Not My Roderick one doesn't exist, and the Disney Plus movies are soulless husks that I don't hate myself enough to watch. So basically, I'll be looking at the movies that some people actually like, with all of them being in one big fat video that I'm probably going to regret making. Why'd I do this to myself? The one that started it all, with it beginning with my king, Roderick Heffley. Yeah, this is the one character that literally everyone knows about because he's funny and he was in Oppenheimer for some reason. And he's waking up Greg even though it's 4 in the morning and a week before school starts. Also, I think it's implied that Roderick's a stoner.
What is that smell? I can't even identify it.
Which, if that's true, then Roderick is somehow even better than he already was. But after this little goof, we get the bit where Greg is talking about himself and there's an animated background, with this being a recurring trope in these movies. And here we're introduced to Greg's massive ego, which I don't think I have to go much into. I know he's an asshole. You know he's an asshole. Him being an asshole is the whole point of the story. Let's move on. So after this, he goes to his first day of middle school, where he refuses to talk to this 7th grade girl that I completely forgot the name of. It's okay though, as I don't think she shows up ever again after this movie. Also, there's the scene where Chirag explains the cheese touch. I don't know why, but I still find this scene funny, even though a lot of this movie has lost its charm for me over the years. I think it's just down to the fact that I found a bass boosted edit from 2017 and it absolutely killed me with laughter when I was a kid. Because you have to understand, being 10 years old meant loud equals funny, and even being 18 years old now, loud still sorta equals funny. So yeah, that's probably why the scene's still funny to me. Also, we get introduced to Fregley, who's funny just for the fact that he's a genuine fucking menace in this movie, even though a lot of his humor is just haha gross XD. So we go back to Greg's house, where he tries to steal Roderick's yearbook, and we also find out that Roderick reads naughty magazines. Ooh. But oh no, Roderick sees him and says he's going to kill him, which, considering how much of a dick Greg is, I genuinely wished he did die. But he doesn't, and instead pisses on Roderick, and he rightfully gets punished for it. After that, Greg decides to join wrestling because he wants to be in the yearbook. This whole wrestling thing goes absolutely nowhere, but we get to see some random coach get brutally assaulted, so that's pretty funny. After this, Greg decides he has to make Riley cool, as Riley is a bit of a doofus, which begins a rift between Riley and Greg. Now it's Halloween, where they go trick-or-treating, but they end up messing with these teenagers, and they get chased into a forest. I don't know why, but this whole forest scene just kind of reminds me of Smiling Friends, probably because Fregley's a demon. Also, before and after this whole Halloween ordeal, we get more Frank and Roderick, and they're honestly the ones that carry this movie. Like, a lot of the stuff with Greg and Riley is just kind of boring. So having these two being fucking psychos to either Greg or each other definitely got me through this movie. So back to Greg, with him continuing his quest to be remembered, and to satiate his ego, he joins the Safety Patrol, which is ran by Mr. Winsky, who treats it as some sacred institution, which is just hilarious to me. That was until he made a pop culture reference, and whenever I hear a pop culture reference in a kid's movie, I want to tear my ears out.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Now it's winter, and Riley almost dies in a big wheel accident, and by this point I started to notice a pattern here. It's basically just Greg being a dick to Riley, with Greg either making an ass out of himself or harming Riley, with Riley gradually liking Greg less. And this is pretty much most of the movie, even after the big blowout where they get mad at each other, with Greg still being a total ass until literally the last 10 minutes. But there is one scene that stands out, and that's Zooey Mama. I don't know why, but Zooey Mama is kind of like another Big Chungus to me, where it was initially unironically funny until it became so unfunny that it became ironically funny. So now whenever I think of Diary of a Wimpy Kid, I just immediately think of Zooey Mama, and I have to say whenever I literally bring it up ever. So cutting to the end of the movie, the teenagers from Halloween show up out of nowhere and force Riley to eat the cheese. And after Riley is accused of doing this, Greg takes responsibility. And after that, they act like nothing ever happened, even though Greg had been a total dick throughout the entire year. What a movie. So yeah, I'm sorry to any fans of this movie for sort of trashing on it. This definitely isn't the worst thing I've seen, but I did not enjoy it at all. At least Frank and Roderick are funny, which, hey, the next movie is Roderick Rules, so maybe I'll like that more. Spoiler, I liked Roderick Rules less than this one. So if fans of these movies weren't angered by me dissing the first one, then they sure as hell will be angered by me dissing the next one. So like I said earlier, this is probably going to be the one that's going to make you mad if you like these movies, as I kind of hate this one, honestly, and I mostly blame myself. I think it was mainly down to me knowing this was going to have a lot of Roderick in it, so I set my expectations unrealistically high, and it didn't help that I actually really liked the first 30 minutes. Yeah, I'm serious, so let's talk about those first 30 minutes. So we start at the skating rink, where Greg is starting the 7th grade, and everything's going fine and dandy, and I really like how Greg isn't a total asshole to Riley this time. And Roderick and Frank are here, and they're good as always. It's not perfect though, as Fregley's here, and he's not really a somewhat funny menace anymore. He's just more haha gross XD, laugh, laugh, laugh. Also, Riley reminded me of Christian when he talked about Holly.
She's almost as pretty as my mom.
With Greg trying to get with her, but Roderick, being the absolute king that he is, crashes the whole thing. After that, we get introduced to Mom Bucks, and Roderick's reaction is genuinely one of the greatest reactions to anything in any movie.
You'll save up your mom bucks.
Can I cash out now?
It's even funnier when it's revealed he's just buying a bunch from a pawn shop. So now we cut to them at school, and everything kind of grinds to a halt. But hey, at least this movie has the Riley waving meme. Although putting it into context, it was just part of an elaborate poop joke, which was probably hilarious to me when I was 8. This whole incident made the parents mad, so now they're forcing both Greg and Roderick to stay home as they go to a water park with Manny. And they also tell Roderick not to have anyone over, with him proceeding to have a huge ass party. And Roderick, being the absolute giga chat he is, he locks Greg in the basement with Greg calling Riley to bust him out. After this, there's a fairly typical party montage, but one thing that stuck out was there's a picture of Riley being kissed by 2 teenage girls, so yikes. And funnily enough, this is where the movie starts to nosedive. There's still some funny stuff that I like they had to change the bathroom door to hide the evidence of the party, and they replaced it with one that doesn't have a lock on it. And Frank as well, being Frank to this whole thing. This whole experience was enough to make the two brothers bond, which on one hand I kind of like, as I have 2 older brothers, but on the other hand, Roderick being an asshole is way funnier, so boo. But I'm sorry, I really checked out of this movie during the second half, mainly due to the atrocious pacing. There being so many dead subplots and subbeats that just add to nothing. Like, there's this whole thing where Sherrod goes away for 3 months, but Greg is mad at him for some reason, so he treats him as if he were invisible, and that applies to the entire school, and that added to literally nothing. There's also another scene where Greg and Roderick go out and prank people with fake vomit, and it also adds nothing. It's after the scene where we have the one time in history where I don't like Frank, as they eventually find out Roderick had a party when they were gone, despite the house being practically perfect when they got home. So they got mad at both Greg and Roderick and basically ruined their lives. And I would have let this slide if Frank was funny in the scene, but he's not. He's just mad, which is super lame. So now Greg and Roderick hate each other again, and honestly this movie started to improve with them hating each other. But then they're forced to visit their grandfather at the retirement home, where Holly is there. Greg and Holly talk about the importance of siblings, and this is where we get the sorta big finale where Greg is running around in his underwear because Roderick wanted to show his diary to Holly. Now this ending's kind of weird just for the fact that while it is somewhat accurate to the book, it has a bit of the last straw ending injected into it for some reason. But there is one scene during this whole sequence that almost destroys the entire movie for me. That's when Greg runs into the ladies' changing room to destroy the evidence, with a bunch of old women seeing him and trying to gang up on him. And I know this is them trying to beat him up because they think he's a stalker, but even then, this is just gross. But he gets back to the room, and Roderick got it all on tape, so he basically uses the tape to blackmail Greg. However, that's not the end, as there's a talent show that Roderick wanted to be in to show his band off, but as part of the punishment for the party, he couldn't play. But Greg decided to partner with Riley in his magic act, and there was a poop joke in there somewhere, as there just wasn't enough gross humor in these movies. So Roderick can play with his band, and they're all happy. All's well that ends well. So yeah, like I said earlier, being brutally honest, I kind of hate this movie. Yes, there are some great moments in this movie, but the pacing, the dead plot points and subplots, and the 2 questionable parts really brought this movie down for me. And I wouldn't mind those dead plot points and plot beats if they were actually funny, like the Mom Bucks. I completely forgot about that, but at least that was funny. But unfortunately, a lot of the non-Frank and Roderick humor in these movies just doesn't work for me at all. I honestly feel kind of bad for hating this movie, as this does seem to be the fan favorite amongst people who like these movies. So sorry for not liking this, and more power to the people who do.
Ha! Guess who's the laugher now? Me! I'm the laugher!
Diary of a Wimpy Kid Dog Days is the best of these movies because it has the most Frank in it. Yeah, I'm not kidding when I say I kind of like this movie. Is it all because of Frank? There's other stuff I like, but yeah, it's mostly because of Frank. But let's talk about the other stuff. So we begin this final chapter during Greg's last week of school where the public pool is open, and I got really worried here for an honestly trivial reason, but it still had me worried. It's the fact that they had 2 pee jokes within the span of like 5 minutes. I know these movies have their fair share of piss and shit jokes, but Jesus Christ, these first 5 minutes felt like I was watching a shitty DreamWorks movie. Anyway, after this we have the typical Diary of a Wimpy Kid opening, and they're at school again, so I just kind of tapped out. But but Greg asked Holly for her phone number and she wasn't able to finish writing it. We also get introduced to Holly's sister, who's an absolute bitch and I hate her. So with school being over now, Greg goes home and is shrimp from Mountain friends. But turns out Greg actually isn't allowed to spend all day playing Mouse Quest, so he runs through the sprinklers and gets a football, and when Frank comes home, he says that he's been playing sports. But then Frank goes to the TV and finds out Greg got level 987413 in Mouse Quest, so Frank gets really mad and rips out all the TV cables. And this scene is the definition of peak Frank, as it looks like he's taking joy in tormenting Greg, and this is how he acts for like the first third of the movie, and I love it. Also, I forgot to write this down in the script, but Frank spends some time with Greg trying to bond with him, and it's pretty funny. So now Greg tries to call Holly by trial and erroring his way to find the phone number, and one of the people he calls is Coach Malone, which is someone I haven't brought up till now, but I kind of slept on him. He's obviously not the funniest character in this movie, but he's funnier than most, so that's something. So now Greg is going to the country club, as Riley's family has a membership there, and Holly is a tennis coach. But Frank has other ideas as he signs Greg up for an internship at his office. So Greg lies and says that he actually works at the country club, which means there's inevitably going to be a liar revealed moment. Oh goody! So now it's the 4th of July and Frank's talking to some guy about dogs, and then boom, he gets a dog that very day. What a guy. The dog is fine, but I'm more of a cat person, so I'm obligated to like it less. Also, I haven't really talked about Roderick yet, as he doesn't really matter that much to this movie's story until the end, but he's still just as funny as he's always been. He basically spends most of the movie using Greg to sneak into the country club, and that's pretty much all he does. Now Greg is going to the beach with Riley's family, and this is where the movie starts slowing down a bit. I think all these movies have a problem with pacing, as they all slow down after 30 to 40 minutes, but here it's not as bad as the first two. So they spend time at a vacation home and the boardwalk, but Greg doesn't like it, so he accidentally calls 911 with the shitty phone and is sent home early. And because of this, he's no longer allowed to go to the country club, so now he's got to sneak in. With him being able to keep this whole shtick going until like the hour mark, where his dad finds out he lied, and they actually don't dwell on the liar revealed stories that much, which is a godsend. But now, as a way to mend the rift between Greg and Frank, they go on a Boy Scout camp thing. This is shown earlier in the movie, but it doesn't really become important until now. So the leader of this rival troop is being a big old meanie head because he thinks Greg and his troop are a bunch of doofuses that know nothing about camping. But turns out the leader's an even bigger doofus as he disses Frank. So Greg tries to pull off Frank, baby! He tries this by putting a bunch of ants in their sleeping bags to make them run out and get caught in the string covered in honey. Didn't go 100% as planned, but in the end, the doofus leader looks like a big smelly idiot after Frank outs him for being a doofus. So they go to a motel and they have a nice father-son moment. And that's not me being ironic. I don't know why, but the whole father-son aspect in this movie is much more endearing than the brother aspect in Roderick Rules. I think it's mainly because Frank is overall funnier than Roderick, and the relationship between Frank and Greg is much more relatable to me. And I think the relatability mostly has to do with the Boy Scouts part. Kind of reminded me of a summer camp that I had on Catalina Island in 2022 with my dad being there. But after this, it might sound like this is where the movie ends, right? Nope, because Holly's stupid ass sister is having her stupid ass Sweet 16, and Roderick has a crush on Holly's sister for some reason. So Greg convinced Holly to have Roderick's band play at her sister's party. So this is our grand finale to this trilogy. Roderick singing Baby and crashing Holly's sister's Sweet 16. This is so corny and stupid in early 2010s, which is why I love this scene. And that's it. It might have felt like I kind of skimmed over this one, and if it did feel like that, then I'm sorry, as it's been a long video, at least by my standards. Also, I've had to talk about 3 movies here with me not liking 2 of them, so give me a break. As for my final thoughts on this one in particular though, it's pretty good. Yeah, as someone who didn't like the first 2 and had a pretty bad feeling about this one going into it, I was very happy that I ended up liking this one. It's definitely not perfect, as it still has a lot of problems that were in the first 2, but those problems are much less severe in this one. And it has the most Frank in it, so that's why I think this one's the best. Like seriously, people need to talk about Frank more, as Steve Zahn absolutely killed it in this role. Well, after rewriting this outro multiple times, I can definitely say that these were movies. And upon reevaluating my thoughts and everything I wrote down for this, I do think I was a little harsh. Like on Letterboxd, I initially gave Roderick Rules a 3 out of 10, which in hindsight was probably too low. But even then, I only bumped it up to a 4 out of 10, so me giving these movies further examination didn't really change my opinion all that much. And that's kinda sad, honestly, if you again consider how addicted I was to this franchise as a kid. But hey, maybe I might revisit these in like a year or 2 from now and see something then that I didn't see now. Although I sure as hell won't put them all in one video again, as it was so damn draining making this video, even though I had a ton of fun editing it. So yeah, moral of the story, don't try to cram an entire trilogy of reviews into one video if you get burned out easily. It doesn't end well.